Anyway, let's move on to Biden's advisors. So Biden's been picking his cabinet and getting his advisors in for different things. And what is this? The education minister has some pretty...
Well, she's actually the advisor. Since this scandal's emerged, she said that she's going to stick to her role as the president of the California State Board of Education, but she's still a senior advisor for Biden currently. And essentially, she's praised the CCP, or the Chinese Communist Party's education system, and I think she's got a doctorate, and she's been doing research in education since the 80s, roughly. I had a quick look at some of her published articles. So she's been in kind of academia for quite some time.
What's her field, do you know?
I think she's an educationalist.
So she studies in the idea of educating people.
Yeah, so all of her research was essentially looking at how teachers can kind of conduct themselves, essentially. And
this is an image of her on screen.
Yep, there she is. And she's also a university professor at Stanford, which probably surprises no one that she is praising communists.
So what does she think? She thinks the communist Chinese system is preferential, and why?
She described it as magical, which is a really kind of compelling praise of the system, which is, so extreme and designed to indoctrinate students, essentially. And I'll get into how it actually works. It's horrendous, by the way. It's really quite a terrible education system, not based in any evidence whatsoever. But I would also like to point out that while she was the president of the California State Board of Education, they tried to make ethnic studies compulsory, and it only got struck down because the governor of California vetoed it. In her 2017 book, which is called Empowered Educators, How High-Performing Systems Shape Teaching Quality Around the World, and supposedly this book had been flying under the radar for kind of the past 3 years, and it's only recently emerged with her links to Biden, that the kind of things that she's been saying about communist China. So I've pulled a quote from the book, which is particularly worrying, I suppose. She says, "In the Tao traditions of ritual, the phrase heaven, earth, sovereign, parent, teacher is repeated and becomes ingrained in how people see themselves, holistically governed and supported," which is basically explicitly stating that people in China willingly indoctrinate themselves by repeating statements until they believe them, which is like the quintessential indoctrination. You just repeat something until you believe it is true, which is some really 1984-esque stuff there.
Like, they're not just talking about, you repeat a fact like you revise. It's repeating a philosophical or political thing.
Yeah, it's deeply political, in fact, because sovereign refers to the leader of the nation, which is obviously President Xi Jinping, and
so the Chinese Communist Party as the deep ruler.
So, and he's also been quoted to say that the education system should serve the Communist Party in its management of the country, and adherence to the party leadership is essential to the development of higher education in the country. So this is the education system that she is praising for some reason. I have no idea why.
Like, the sole purpose of education is to serve the party.
Yeah.
And she thinks this is magic.
She wants to indoctrinate children, essentially, by the looks of it.
Does she give anything else about, what specifically she thinks is magical about it? Or
I think it's the student-teacher relationship. She likes the authoritative style, how they essentially are passive consumers of information rather than questioning what their teacher says in a kind of Western individualist style. So she is essentially saying that teachers should be the ultimate authority in the classrooms and children should have no say. They should kind of sit down, be quiet, and be told what to think.
Passive consumers who just accept what the teacher's saying, no matter
exactly,
what it is.
Yes.
Very much reminds me of the sit in the pod, eat the bugs meme, where it's like, you just will consume, literally.
So I'll just go through what the actual education system entails in China, because it gets worse than this. So the average day in China starts at 7:30 in the morning and continues on until 6 p.m. in the evening, which is already a really long day for a young person. But then many schools run classes from 7 till 9, which are kind of additional study classes. And quite often, if the school does not run these classes, children will be doing homework until about 10 o'clock at night. So basically, they're dedicating their entire day to their education. From start to finish, they are working on educating themselves, which sounds kind of productive in practice, but it's actually really maladaptive based on the kind of evidence that emerges from educational psychology, which I'll cover in a second.
I wonder, is it because you have ideological sessions or things like that, so that's padding out the day? Or is it just the idea that if you just study all the time, you will get better?
It's a bit of both, really.
Okay.
Because they do obviously teach the communist Chinese teachings to children, and they try and indoctrinate them. That's, as he said, it's one of their main purposes of the education is to brainwash these children, essentially. Many schools also hold extra classes on Saturday, which are between 3 to 4 hours and cover maths and science. So it seems like they hardly have any time off to actually develop as human beings. They are just sat there being kind of forced to consume information, and the testing is just insane. Like, supposedly they test more than any other society, and everything is taught to pass tests, which is a really poor way of educating people. And I'll go on to...
So she thinks that this structure here, where essentially you don't... I mean, this is like you're saying. So the whole point of the education system is to make you obedient to the party and to serve the party. Ergo, making you educated all the time rather than a fulfilled person is the goal. So she's saying that structure is ideal. And I'm assuming she's thinking because, we'll just have the kids work all the time and therefore they'll be more highly educated. Not necessarily party stuff, if I'm being sympathetic to her.
Yeah, but then at the same time, the working hours are a huge part of the Chinese system. And it seems like in China, they're deliberately making the days really long so they can't have any outside influences beyond the state.
Yeah.
And they also have people who go into Chinese classrooms and they essentially police any Western ideals or signs of individualism or rebellion, and it's cracked down on and punished.
Well, so they have adults come in and observe the kids?
And they observe how the children behave, and if they do not behave properly, then
they give them Ritalin.
So I'm going to compare this to one of the best education systems in the world, which basically does the complete opposite of that, and that is the Finnish education system. So in Finland, school starts at 8:15 typically and ends at 2:45, with an hour for lunch, and they have 15-minute breaks in between each class. So they give them kind of enough time to enjoy their spare time, so to speak. They don't want to necessarily dedicate their entire lives to their education because it's viewed as being relatively unhealthy for developing well-rounded people, which I agree with, and I think my experiences kind of mirror this view. And they believe very strongly in no standardized testing whatsoever, because they believe that it leads teachers into teaching how to pass a test rather than teaching them the actual kind of evidence. And
yeah, I mean, you did psychology. I don't know how much. I mean, was it the case that in psychology you were essentially learning how to pass tests? Because in physics it really was that.
Well, because human beings are so complicated, it's very difficult to test your kind of understanding of human nature, because how do you really test that ultimately? Obviously, we were given essays and lots of coursework, but it was about the quality of the articulation of our arguments and how evidence-based they were.
Rather than the specific answers.
Yeah.
So that's what the Finnish are doing.
Yeah. So essentially they're saying, we don't mind what conclusions you come to, but we want you to make up your own minds. And as long as we are teaching you the correct process to come to rational decisions, then that is enough, which I agree with, to be honest. And I also really like that the Finnish have very high standards for teachers. So you need to be well qualified, and they have very high standards that they have to meet, more so than many other westernized countries, which I think lends itself well to developing kind of holistic, well-rounded children.
Essentially, that's the difference between the two extremes. So you've got the extreme Chinese one, where your education is to serve the party, and then the Finnish version where it's very individualized, or at least very individualistic,
Yeah.
focusing on the fact that, okay, yeah, we could just teach you a bunch of stuff endlessly, but quite frankly, that's not really going to make you the best person you could be.
Yeah, I think the difference is they're not teaching, like, they're not rote learning facts, they're not just regurgitating information like the Chinese do. It's more about giving people the skills to make up their own minds for themselves, which I think is...
This, of course, gets into the obedience of it, because like the Chinese system, the reason you've got to just regurgitate what you're getting told is because if you go to the political world, that's what happens.
I mean, it's reinforcing a mindset that you defer to authority, I think.
Yeah.
That's, I think, probably one of the main purposes of the Chinese education system, is that they defer to the authority of their teacher. They don't question it. If they cause any trouble, then there will be problems. They're not treated as individuals. They are just kind of statistics.